So I don't believe that. So life is, in my opinion, does not start at conception. Life, sperm is alive, eggs are alive. So you need life to create life, except when the world started. But anyways, so my thing is viability. I think it should be legal as long as the baby needs to be in the stomach to survive, because I believe that's an attachment of you, because anything that you do to your body, if you drink coffee, if you smoke, that is going to affect the thing that's growing inside of you. And you cannot have your own. If you're pregnant, you have to really watch. You could have an abortion from an herbal tea. There are herbs that will induce an abortion, and so to say that that's murder, to me, is not correct. And then I also have a point about IVF, and I don't think that the second.
Yeah, can we, if you don't mind, can we stick to one point at a time?
Yeah.
So can I ask a couple clarifying questions, if you don't mind?
I don't mind.
Okay, great. So the first question I have is, you said as long as the baby's in the stomach, then it's not murder. Is that correct?
Viable. So as long as it cannot be delivered and stay alive.
Okay, I gotcha.
Yeah.
And so your ultimate dispute is life. You say that life begins, outside of conception. What about human life? When does that begin?
So human life, I think when you're born, you are considered legally a human being. It's a human embryo. I think or a human. You could say.
Well, that can't be true, right? Because otherwise, you wouldn't say that the woman has to keep the baby in her stomach for as long as it's viable.
I don't care about the semantics. It is a human.
Hang on, my turn. You're making the affirmative claim that this is a human life. It must be if it's viable, right?
Oh, well, sorry, there's a car. What?
Okay, so what does viable mean? That's a human, right?
Viable means it's able to survive outside of the womb, so it can be.
And it's
delivered.
a human? Is that a human being?
It's the human species, yeah.
Okay, yeah, it's a human being. So when does it become a human being?
When it's born, I think that it's murder.
It doesn't make any sense. Do you understand that makes no sense? If you say that it's viable in the womb and it's a human being, it can't also only be a human being when it's born.
No, it's of the human species. I'm saying you have the right to, you have bodily autonomy, and you
don't
have
have bodily autonomy.
Okay, just give me a sec. You have to specifically not kill it. You have to specifically not kill it, because if you are just going about your daily life, you could be pregnant and you don't know it, and you drink alcohol, and then you're responsible. If that's murder, if you're responsible for your DNA that you had sex and you're pregnant, you have an egg that's fertilized, you have to specifically not kill it.
Hang on. You got to reel it in because you're all over the place. You're super all over the place. So let's start with this.
You don't understand.
Okay, the idea that you could be pregnant and not even know, but nobody would call that murder. Right? Murder is the unjustified taking of a life. In that particular case, if you have no knowledge that your action is going to take a life, nobody would ever call that murder.
It would be manslaughter.
Nobody would ever call that murder.
Let me
finish point, please. So, for instance, if I was on top of a building and I was working, I was a construction worker, and I had my hammer next to me, and I kicked the hammer off the roof, and then it fell down, hit somebody in the head, and it killed them. I obviously didn't know they were underneath the hammer when I kicked the hammer off the roof. So since that is true, I would not get charged with murder, because that would not be murder, right? That would not be considered murder.
It would be considered that's a person that died, and I don't think that if you don't take care of yourself and your baby dies in your stomach from not taking care of yourself, I think you have to extend that logic if you're going to say that it's a life and that abortion is murder. I think you have to extend that
Yeah,
to...
but maybe you do, but I still don't actually understand your position, because you said that it's only a human life when it's born.
I did not
But
say
then
that. I
you-
said it's
Okay, so when is it a human life?
it's always it's a human. So if it's infringing, it's always a human life. It's of the human
It's
species.
okay, got it.
That's
It's always a human
DNA.
life. So then if that's true, then when I say life begins at conception, I'm correct, right?
No, I wouldn't agree. It's life
What?
before that. It's life before that. The things that create
No,
the
it's not
fertilized
human
egg
life
are
before
are
that.
live.
It's not human life
DNA.
before that.
It is. It's
How
the two
how's
parts.
it human life before that?
So the two parts converge, the sperm and the egg,
that's what
that
makes it a
contain the
human,
DNA
yeah.
of a human.
Yeah, that's what makes it a human. So human life begins at conception. The value part is the human part, right? I don't value the not human part, just like I don't value, for instance, fish. I don't care about fish, right? If you go out with an Uzi to a pond and you just waste 1 million fish with I don't give a shit, right? I have no value for it whatsoever, but it's still a fish, right? It's still a fish's life. So when we're talking about human life begins at conception. Do you disagree or agree with that?
I disagree.
Okay, so what makes it a human life?
Well, it's a human life because it contains human DNA. It's made of human DNA. So sperm and eggs, which is what a baby is made of, which everyone's made of human DNA. That's human. That's the materials, the sexual materials to create life. And when they converge,
If somebody took a machete and cut off your arm would definitely have human DNA. Would it be alive?
yeah, you can not. No.
No, it wouldn't. So it just having human DNA has nothing to do with it being alive.
Sperm and eggs are alive. That's a fact.
Alive in what sense?
They are living just like bacteria. I mean, bacteria isn't
Like
considered
an
alive, but
arm
it's
would
not
be alive
bacteria.
if it was cut off of you? Wouldn't an arm
It's
that
not
was cut
dead,
off of
it
you also
moves on
be
its
alive
own.
by that same criteria?
It moves on its own. Sperm moves on its own. Eggs contain living
Arms can move on their own when they're cut off of you. Yes, they
I'm
absolutely
not talking
can.
about arms.
What's that?
I'm not talking about arms. We're talking about abortion.
No, you're not talking about arms. I'm testing your logic. I'm trying to explain to you this concept, right? That all these things that you keep on claiming make this life, I'm claiming are present in something you claim is not alive.
That's not
So
the
I'm
difference.
trying to figure out how it's actually
yeah,
alive.
Yeah. So I'll tell you the difference. The difference.
Okay.
The difference is actually an arm, you could say, is just as much of a person as a fertilized egg because it's human. It's not yet. It's
The DNA. It has complete
It's not
human
yet
DNA.
exact. Well, yes, and so does an arm. I mean, if that's your comparison. So it's actually a good comparison that you made in a sense.
I don't actually even understand your position. I'm trying to. So what makes a person alive? What makes a person alive? Let's start with that. What makes life? What is that?
So when you're alive, heartbeat is one thing, but I would say for personhood,
You can be alive with no
you
heart.
can be alive. Things can be alive, but they can be non-human or I can draw a distinction where personhood begins.
Well, I mean, scientifically, it's anything
Okay, so
that's
wait,
carbon
so
derivative,
personhood-
right? Biological matter.
Yeah, I'm trying. Hang on, just one step at a time. Let
living
me
moves
try
on
to
its
at least
own.
understand what the position is, because I'm still super confused as to what your position even is. So, as we kind of back up here, let's start with, what does alive mean? What does that mean?
So alive means moving on its own and basically moving on its own and being chemically made, having a genetic code that you're made of.
Okay, so being alive, the criteria is going to be moving on your own and having some kind of genetic material that you're made of.
I would go by the scientific definition, which I don't have memorized, but you could pull it up if you I would agree with the scientific definition if you want to pull it up. But not except for the part that disagrees with what I believe, which is
So so you wouldn't accept the part that disagrees with what you
That's-
believe. You would
that's
just accept the
specific
part that
to
agrees with what you
abortion?
believe.
the part that's specific to abortion, I don't agree with.
Yeah, doesn't the scientific definition define human life
That's
as beginning
human
at
life.
conception?
You asked living, so I would say the scientific definition of life I agree with. So
Yeah, well, I don't know what that is. Do you want me to pull that up?
I just gave some examples of what I believe life is in essence, and if you want a full thing, you can look up what the scientific definition is, and that's what I'll accept. That's what I'll use.
So have
Okay,
you
so
have you
what
guys
if the
heard
sci-
the
what-
research?
philosophical
Okay,
question,
so hang on.
really.
So what if the scientific definition says that human life begins at conception?
I would even say it begins before that. Is the
Hang on,
latest research.
hang on. Can I let her answer, Desiree? So
What
what if
if?
science says human life begins at conception?
I don't agree with that part. I'm saying life in general, there's a scientific definition, which includes things like moving on your own, respiration. When you go down to like the very small microscopic levels, you have things that are moving on their own, eating things. They have genetic code. So those are some of the
Okay.
things. But it is a philosophical question. If you want me to define life.
Well, the only reason I'm asking you to kind of give me some sense of it, so I know what you're even talking about.
Yeah, I just gave you a
So
sense.
what we're quibbling over here is human life, right? That's what we're actually talking about. Is when does human life begin? You agree with me that a human being requires DNA from mother and dad in order to become a human, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So if that's the case, then it would require the sperm and the egg to be fused before it's
Can I
human
add
life.
something?
Hang on. No, you can't. Can you just let us finish? So if that's the case, right, then it would require an egg and a sperm for it to be human life by your own criteria.
A fertilized embryo is a egg and a sperm combined, and they are both living separate of that. Or you could say that you could
but
say
we were
that
talking about
eggs
human
aren't
life.
alive.
I just said, don't you think that the criteria for human life would require the DNA of both a mother and a father? You said yes. So if that's the case, then it would require the sperm and the egg together in order to create human life, correct?
Yeah, to have a person, yes.
Yeah, so then life begins at conception. Human life begins at conception, right?
I don't believe that it's fully baked because I consider a human life to be something that is autonomous
Well, I
and
don't understand.
conscious.
What